We're recording.
And I was farting.
Oh, that's a great start.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Militant Moderate Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Michael Bolin. I'm somebody who voted for both Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump in the last election cycle. I find it hard to be a Republican because guess what? I actually give a shit about people. And I also find it hard to be a Democrat because guess what? I actually give a shit about people.
We're back to the 15 people who actually watch my stuff. But yeah, we're here for you. And, I know not everybody can speak, ball gag, but, I'm from Detroit, so it's kind of required. Hi, this is Paul Michael Bolin, host of the Militant Moderate Podcast that has been on a hiatus for a very, very long time because I learned that I'm not good just talking to technology in a room by myself. You would think that since I do most things by myself, yeah, you can just pencil in, it's probably going to become a meme of some sort. But we're back. So we're going to do something a little bit different, which is going to make it a little bit more easier on Adrian. So we won't do any fancy cuts. There'll be cuts because I just kind of trail off every once in a while and I see something shiny. It's just like, I can't really help it at all. But that being said, Adrian, what is your first question for the Militant Moderate today? Ow, shit. This thing actually it's got little claws on it. You could open a beer with it.
Be careful, dude. Okay, so today's topic is going to be the St. Louis couple, Mark and Patricia McCloskey. By now, a lot of people have seen the videos. I want to know what your opinion is on it and what happened afterwards in terms of them getting their guns confiscated. Were they in the right? Did they handle the guns properly? Should they get more training? How does the Second Amendment come into play? Did the people really march through? So feel free to touch upon this.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning of this, where there were some protesters, some of the Black Lives Matter protesters, which they have a constitutionally protected right to peacefully protest. But apparently they were trying to get to the mayor's house and broke through an iron gate into this little cul-de-sac that has a security gate on it that you have to type in a code. So about 100 or so people go through this gate. I'm thinking they're trying to get to the mayor's house, but you couldn't get to it from where they were. And the McCloskeys were going to have dinner on their patio, and man, they got a really nice house. And basically, they saw that, and Mrs. McCloskey, she got a handgun. Mr. McCloskey got an AR-15, and they basically shooed these guys away from their house. And nobody was hurt, and the only property damage happened to be to that iron gate from them getting into. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. McCloskey came out with guns. Mr. McCloskey had an AR-15, or something that looks like an AR-15, and she had what kind of looks like a Walter PPK, a small handgun, generally associated with all the old James Bond films. So not a huge gun. James Bond didn't really carry a huge gun. He carried something that he can carry concealed in his, and you couldn't tell with his suits. Stuff like, you wanted to look schmancy. That being said, nobody was hurt. No guns were actually fired. The McCloskeys just basically protected their property and basically chased them off of their property. Didn't really chase them that far, but nobody got hurt. Nobody heard any property damage with the exception of the gate that the protesters broke on their way in. I'm pretty sure the peaceful protesting becomes vandalism when you actually break something. And the protesters did break through an iron pedestrian gate in order to get into this cul-de-sac. Now, in my mind, because this is a gated cul-de-sac, it's a little gated community. I don't believe that the protesters had a right to actually go onto private property in in the middle of their protest, because breaking down a door isn't exactly what I would call a peaceful protest. I don't know if they what they could have done in order to legally protest inside that cul-de-sac, being that, one, it was the wrong cul-de-sac. Apparently you couldn't get to the mayor's area for another it was about a quarter mile down the road.
Now, what do you think the NRA would think about their use of firearms, the way they were holding them, and why they were using them?
Well, the NRA, I haven't heard anything official yet, but but Donald Trump has expressed his support for the McCloskeys. The governor of their state has expressed support for the McCloskeys. Now, the mayor or the DA, I'm not sure, but somebody on the local level issued a search warrant for the McCloskeys' residence, and they were searched, and they basically came out and had their guns confiscated. And I'm thinking the NRA is going to have a lot to say about that, because I definitely do. That is, this was their right. Yes, protesters have a right to protest, but you don't have a right to loot. You don't have a right to vandalize. You don't really have a right to riot. And all these things happen, and they want to blame the McCloskeys? I mean, probably because nobody got the name of the 100 or so people that were in front of their house, threatening to burn down the house. Apparently somebody threatened to kill their dog. I don't know if they have a dog. So, everything we kind of live in really, really unique and really, what's the word I'm looking for? Batshit crazy times. It really doesn't sit well with me that they took their freaking guns. Now, the protesters apparently have gone back. I don't know if it was before or after they had their guns taken away. And the next time that they came, protesters, because now, the Streisand effect. Now the McCloskeys, they don't agree with us because they were pointing guns at us. So they all came back. And what we saw was the McCloskeys basically hired some private security guards with AR-15s, which, yeah, you can take away the McCloskeys' guns, but best of luck taking away those security guys' guns. They would know a little bit more about the law. And I'm glad they're being protected. They're not advancing. They're not trying to take, shut down the street. They're just trying to live. They're just trying to exist. And apparently they're Democrats.
And yet you see them on Fox News multiple times. You see Trump supporting them and everything.
Right. I mean, they're
kind of interesting how they sound like they're complete conservative Republicans. They have those guys, and yet they're supporting Democrats. That's a little interesting.
As I said, I lost a few friends, acquaintances, and business contacts on Facebook alone. I lost about 80 people who deleted and blocked or just unfriended me because of my political stances. And I think Trump's an asshole. I really didn't want to vote for him then, didn't want to vote for him now, but because of my vote for Trump, I lost those 80 people that were part of my life. When I voted for Bernie in the primaries in 2016, I have a lot of conservative friends. I have a lot of libertarian friends. I have a lot of greenies, and I have a lot of radically independent, and one socialist. Good guy. Shout out to Andy. That wasn't. Did I just do the white power thing? I did that, didn't I? Okay, just kind of blur that out. So, hey, Andy.
I'm sure there's a problem with the thumbs up as well. Just about anything you do at this point.
Yeah.
Touching that's supremacy.
Man, look at that.
What you got?
Forgot to put on my Tim Black button.
Oh, jeez.
That's right. No, Joe.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so 80 people unfriended me because I spoke ill of Hillary and voted for Trump. 0 people deleted me for voting for Bernie Sanders in the primaries. And I have a lot of friends on the right, on the hard right. I have hard, really right friends that, basically make Reagan look like Sarah Silverman.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, no, I got some really hard weirdos, but they didn't delete me. They didn't unfriend me. And I don't know what's going to happen. You see a couple just wanted to protect their home. 100 or so people come in and they get their guns taken away. They get investigated. And there are people calling out to put them in jail for protecting their home. This is nuts. Never underestimate the stupidity of large crowds. Ever, ever, ever.
And what do you think that is? Because individually, people seem to be mostly rational. But when you look at it on a macro scale, whether it's a crowd, whether it's on social media, whether it's a bunch of people at a rally, it feels like everybody acts one way, and it's the lowest common denominator. It's the bar as low as possible. People instead of the highest. Why is it not the other way around?
There's no nuance in a large crowd. There's no reason in a large crowd. It just moves. And I've seen people that I've respected. I've seen people that I thought that something like that would be the last thing on their minds. And then just the crowd starts. I had an incident when I was in college. Generally, when the first hard snow falls, enough to make snowballs, there's generally a giant snowball fight between the couple of dormitories, one of which I lived in. I was working security that night, and a pizza delivery guy came in, and I don't know what the hell happened, but I'm seeing through the lobby window that they're bouncing his car up and down so that they flipped it over on its roof, and we're spinning it around with this poor freaking guy in there. Now, it wasn't that big a car. It was like something Honda Econobox, but I had friends in that crowd. I had people who I knew were straight A students in that crowd, and they just go nuts. At some point, yeah, if enough rational people just kind of pull out of it and the crowd gets smaller until like one person realizes, oh, it's just me, I'm the asshole. Oh, but that takes time. And I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, whatever one applies. But yeah, the more people, the lower the IQ gets, just collectively.
Well, that's good news, knowing America is the third largest country by population.
Yeah, but we do kind of spread out. But
Oh, we're crowded in the big cities.
Yeah, and that's where all the crime and the violence happens. Go figure. So.
And not to be a partisan hack, but the large cities tend to be Democrat controlled. I know I'm painting a broad picture here.
Yeah, and we didn't have
that's kind of a tendency. We got to be careful.
We had protests in a lot of those cities that absolutely nothing happened. The protesters made their point. Nobody broke anything. Nobody nobody got hurt. No property got damaged, and they had their point across.
Yeah. I mean, look at here in Los Angeles. We had tons of protests. We had riots. We had looters. We had all three. Now, the cameras were only pointing at the looters. Those places where the cop cars were completely burned down to the ground, flipped over. You had Molotov cocktails. You had people breaking windows. You had hammers. You had fireworks. You had all the good stuff. Yeah, and then when it comes to the peaceful protest, nobody was pointing the cameras at that. So it made it sound like nationwide we had protests that turned into looting and just destroying everything. So yeah, there were a few idiots that were destroying everything, that were being violent. And that kind of negates the whole purpose of the protest.
Exactly.
The majority of people were actually protesting properly.
When you do something stupid like that, like flip over a cop car or flip over a pizza delivery guy's car, nobody's going to hear your point. You're not trying anybody, because this is America. When somebody goes up, I want to change things now. That's literally like all they can do. But enough people do that, shit gets done.
That's what happened in Boston, right? That's why the water is not only salty, but it tastes like tea. Isn't that how the country kind of came to be? Because we got tired of it, we got fed up, we kind of created a mob, we protested, and we told them, fuck off with their taxes. We don't want that fucking tea. Fuck out of here.
Right.
All of that.
And I'm pretty sure a bunch of that tea actually just was stolen, and because the whole thing, like, oh no, we threw all of it, absolutely all of it got thrown into the bay. No, I had this earlier.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, protesting is part of America's DNA. It doesn't matter the color or the.
No, we're an unruly bunch.
That's how it started over 240 years ago. So I'm all for protesting. It's part of the First Amendment, not the second, third, fourth, fifth. It's part of the first: freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, etc. So that is something that is important. Whenever you're not happy with what the government is doing, don't let it become tyrannical. Speak up. Do something about it. Go, take it to the streets. Get the message known. Get people to sign a petition. Call your senators. Call your representatives. Do something. Don't just complain. So in this case,
I talked about this before. There's a great podcast out there called the Congressional Dish Podcast, and her 100th episode, she did an interview, and she doesn't normally do interviews in her show, but basically Jen tends to read all the bills that are passing through the House and Senate. So if you really want to find out what's happening in Washington, Congressional Dish Podcast, she's awesome. So the person that she interviewed, she asked him flat out, do our politicians, are they more worried about votes or money? And oddly enough, he said votes. And they basically got us convinced that our vote doesn't count, right? But our vote does count. What he said was, a politician can lean one way or another and money just finds them. There's a little bit of money at just about every point on the political spectrum. But they're more worried about our vote because they got to re-up their job every 2, 4, or 6 years. And the guy who said that was Jack Abramoff, i.e. Casino Jack, one of the spent a lot of time being a Washington lobbyist, and quite a bit of time in jail too for not actually doing the most legal things. But if anybody knows lobbying, he knows lobbying. So yeah, as you were saying, if you write your congressman, they count that as like, oh, that's maybe like 100 people. If you call, oh man, okay, that's maybe 1,000 people. They're gauging the amount of basically eyes that are on one particular issue. If you actually physically show up at their office, wait to actually make an appointment to talk to them, that's probably like 10,000 or something like so. But an email, it's easy. I email my 2 senators and my House rep, which I'm kind of screwed. If ever there was a trifecta that was free of rational thought, it would definitely be Dianne Feinstein, Kamala Harris, and my House rep, Adam Russia. Yes. Yeah, it's a trifecta of stupid that the world has hardly seen. At least the Three Stooges entertained us.
So with the St. Louis couple, do you think they have proper trigger discipline? Like the way they handled their firearm did not look safe at all.
No. And I believe I've, so I did mention earlier how she did not have what we call trigger discipline, where hey, look at that. Okay. So when holding a weapon, you keep your
BB gun.
you take your finger and you put it here. Okay. But she had it right here. She was ready to rock. She's like, no. And she had those crazy freaking eyes, and it's like let the people. That's why not a lot of people were going to jump on the lawn.
Yeah.
So you don't run it from here. But I honestly believe she was ready to shoot anything that came towards her. No. Was this an ideal? No, this is ideal. This wasn't ideal, but it's not against the law. And I don't know if the last thing on my mind would be trigger discipline when I have 130 people in front of me, and some of them are threatening to burn down the house. Some are threatening to kill the dog. I heard somebody said that. I don't even know what kind of dog they have. Nobody took a look at it. I haven't seen it. And the thing about how Mr. McCloskey was holding his AR-15, he is definitely a southpaw. He's definitely left-handed, and that was a right-handed weapon, meaning when he pulls the trigger, the shells are going to kick out right in his chest, and sparks are going to like burn his nipples off. So I understand why he was a little tentative holding that, knowing that he's probably going to get a little burned if he has to pull the triggers. You figure with that, as good, as beautiful as that house was, they could have afforded a left-handed AR-15. I'm just saying.
Do you want to explain about the ejector port being on the other side? Left-handed?
Okay, you can just kind of punch this in. Now, so this is an AR-15. Okay?
Yeah, fucking Uzi.
I'm again, trigger discipline. And when I fire, if I were to fire the weapon, hot brass would shoot out of this ejector port.
Right.
Now he's left-handed. So you can see the ejector port is still there, and it's going to kick right into me. And a bit of sparking is going to, a bit of basically hot gunpowder is going to be kicking back right into his chest. So I understand why he was a little bit tentative when he was holding it, because again, it's going to kind of hurt him. It's like this, they go that way.
Right. So they do make left-handed versions. So the ejector port is on the other side.
Yeah. And they didn't seem to be that much more expensive, but they're still under $1,000. I mean, look at that house.
Yeah, that's multi-million-dollar.
They probably spend $1,000 a month just on like the floral arrangements.
At least.
Good for them.
Right, but one of the biggest things, because myself, I am pro-Second Amendment. You seem to be pro-Second Amendment with the first name in Militant Moderate.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think that it's kind of cringy to see the way they swept each other? They could have actually shot each other. With the way they were sweeping back and forth, there were a couple of times where they pointed at each other. And that's the first thing they teach you not to do when you go to the gun range. When somebody gives you a lesson, you should have those lessons before you buy your first gun. And in this case, I hope they had those lessons, but they clearly did not practice it. The way they held it was very amateurish. I get that they had to protect themselves. Looking for
Mike,
you want to make sure you don't actually kill your wife or your husband.
Now, I think Mike Tyson said it best, where you can plan, you can speak, you can train, but man, everything just goes out the window the second you get hit in the mouth. And they had 100 or so people in front of their house ready to do them physical harm. I understand. That's something that you have to train, something that's become like a second nature so that you don't even think about it. And they had all sorts of things to think about. I'm giving them a pass. Again, none of what we're talking about is illegal. Bad form. I guess my guess is what the city is trying to charge them with is brandishing, where you basically just have your gun and you just kind of point it at people. Right. Because you are frightening them because you have more power than them to inflict harm because you have a gun.
But apparently in Missouri, it's considered borderline assault when you do that, brandishing, where you threaten somebody with a firearm. It's almost considered assault. That's why they're being prosecuted right now. Yeah,
and I am really, really looking forward to those court hearings. I hope that they are televised because Trump is on their side. The governor I saw earlier today of Missouri is on their side. Only locally are people not on their side. And they can still afford private security, which, they're probably a little irritated. They're kind of kicking themselves because, when you get, now they need private security. So obviously they know the security forces it's like, oh yeah, they're going to fleece these people. High profile. If they would have got them like a week ago, they could have maybe gotten them in on a coupon. Maybe like a 20% off, maybe, you pay for 2 armed guards, you get the third one free. But yeah, all those coupons went out the window now. Yeah. These guys are probably making bank. Just saying.
But you know what kind of sucks is there's a bit of a class situation going on here where if you're rich and this shit happens to you, you can still hire people with guns to protect you. If you're broke and you have a crowd that is pissed at you and either you can't afford guns or you do, but then they get seized like they were for those guys, how do you protect yourself? You can't hire armed security when you're broke. And that's the majority of people.
Yeah. I mean, the majority of people don't live behind fences and gates and locking gates and cul-de-sacs and those kind of things.
But I mean, look at all the looting that happened. Not to conflate them with the protesters, the looters as a separate thing. They destroyed tons of businesses, and those businesses could not defend themselves because they were in big cities that have very strict gun controls. If they didn't have the same kind of gun control, those business owners might have been able to protect themselves with a sawed-off shotgun, like in 1992. I'm exaggerating. Those were
sawed-off shotguns are, I believe,
they're legal,
completely illegal without special permits.
If they just had like a regular shotgun to protect themselves from it, those people destroying those windows, looting the living shit out of all those small businesses, would probably have thought twice if they saw the owner show up with a shotgun going, "Get off my property," you know.
Yeah, we saw that.
What are you going to do? Call the police? The police's cars are on fire upside down right outside your store. How do you protect yourself?
Yeah, I think it was in Seattle, but an officer had to abandon her vehicle because basically the protesters swarmed around it. And there were 2 AR-15s in the vehicle and a shotgun.
Ooh. She needs a grenade.
Yeah, a guy who was I saw a video. I wish I could remember the name of it, but he was he has a military past. I think special forces stuff. I think, but he was protecting one of the news crews that was covering the riots, and he saw somebody with an AR-15, and he managed to. And he had his own AR-15, and he managed to take it away from that guy. It didn't, there wasn't a lot of violence in taking that guy. You just, basically the kid was holding the gun and the guy comes up, "Hi, I'm all the violence. Why don't you just hand it to me?" And he did. He basically kind of snatched it out of his hand, took it apart. And apparently there was a very, very awkward exchange when he came up. "Hey, officer, I have 2 of your AR-15s. I need to give them back to you." Those stores and a lot of these cities have a massive, I hope they sue the crap out of the cities for not protecting them or their businesses. I'm all for peaceful protest. And I'm of the mindset that people are peacefully protesting. They don't need my permission. I don't need to agree with them. Maybe what they're saying would make me angry and piss me off, but it doesn't matter. Does not matter. Yeah. So I'm free speech absolutist, and basically peaceful protesting absolutist. Yeah. So I would say good luck to the McCloskeys. And why don't you down below in the comments tell us what you think of the McCloskeys? Were they wrong? Am I wrong? Am I right? I love to hear those. Those are the fun ones. Okay. And you could also tell me how I've got it completely wrong, because actually that can be kind of fun. But is there anything we want else that we need to talk about this subject?
For this subject, that's it. I wanted to move on to the second one and final one. A couple days ago, we had Black Lives Matter that was painted in New York City, right next to the Trump Tower. And I'm sure you know what happened. Somebody decided to paint over it. Yeah. And they got charged with a hate crime. Now, do you want to explain a little bit more about this?
Okay, from my understanding, we're talking about the mayor of New York okayed the words Black Lives Matter right in front of Trump Tower in Manhattan. Now, I still think how is this Trump's fault? Seriously. How is this his fault? What, somebody decided to like black out? And no, I'm not, I wasn't trying to be a pun there in there, but they put black paint over one or two of the letters. As far as a hate crime, I don't believe it's a hate crime. It's vandalism if that was sanctioned by the city and they destroyed or tried to damage something that was paid for with the Manhattanites' tax dollars. Mayor signed off on it. I even saw him do some sort of a ceremony. I don't know if that was first putting it down or repairing or redoing the Black Lives Matter in yellow paint. Yeah, I just don't. Isn't the punishment? Isn't that enough? I mean, it's not a life. It is something that's written on a street. It's on concrete. It's paint on concrete. They vandalize it. They deserve to be charged for their vandalism. But hate crime? Seriously? No. Mm-mm. No, I think the punishment is already good enough.
Well, what do you think of the symbolism? The fact that it's essentially saying that Black lives don't matter. That's how a lot of people are seeing it.
Right. And it gets into that whole, when I say, yeah, Black Lives Matter, of course, all lives matter. But we've had a few cases where it seems to be that certain people need to be reminded that the Black Lives Matter. I would especially say the case of George Floyd and Freddie Gray. In both cases, these people were restrained by police. And I firmly believe that when a police restrains you, they are responsible for your safety.
Because you're in their custody, so it's their responsibility to look after your health.
Exactly. So that is your. If they are arresting you, they need to protect you. They're not a judge and jury. They don't have the right to take what they did with Freddie Gray, take him on a Baltimore bus ride, or they didn't restrain him to the side of the paddy wagon, so he was just backing back and forth and his freaking snapped his spine. And we saw George Floyd, like 8 minutes, 46 seconds. Is that it? That's how long that Officer Chauvin had his knee on George's neck. Now, George Floyd, not a good guy, but it doesn't matter. I don't care if the lady that George Floyd put a gun in her belly, and she was pregnant at the time, so pointed a gun at her unborn child to make her more complicit in the robbery that they were saying. Yeah, I don't care if that woman was Derek Chauvin's mother, wife, or daughter. He had no right to do what he did. And the judicial system, they just arrest them. The judicial system will pass judgment. I know it's, when you look at some of those things, it makes you want to vomit. But I really do not believe that this was a race thing. I think this was a power thing, the abuse of power, that Derek Chauvin abused his power. There was another cop there. Apparently he had been there. Chauvin had like 19 years on the job. And I believe the other African-American cop who was on, like, he was either on the small of George's back or his legs. And there were two guys there, the younger white guy and the Asian guy. Apparently neither one of them had a month's worth of service under their belt. They were really rookies. And the two guys were their training officers. Yeah. Training officers. Derek Chauvin was a training officer.
So what do you think is the solution? Like, what is the right way to bring attention to this stuff so that cops don't get such a power trip and end up accidentally or on purpose killing people in custody and such, so it doesn't happen again? Protests? Calling people? What do you do?
I've said this for years that I think it could be an extension of the city council. I think there needs to be basically committees made up of people in that who live in that neighborhood. They need to be elected from that neighborhood, and these people would decide on whether or not a cop has the right to work in their district. So basically, I feel that people, people should have the choice of how they are policed. There are people who have the broken windows. Oh, break a window. If it's, obviously this is just going to get worse, so I'm going to charge them for breaking the window. Or maybe they just want to say, hey, it's a $50 fine. It's a window. He didn't do it on purpose. But basically, city councils would be able to take a look at a cop and say that, no, we can't. They should at least have the power to say that cop can't work in their jurisdiction or has no power in their jurisdiction. Because you look at Chauvin, apparently he had like 19 complaints and he was involved in a couple of iffy shoots. You can bring that evidence to a city council and then that cop could say, yeah, you know what? He can't work here anymore. If criminal charges need to be brought up, that's a whole other thing. But at the very least, elect like 4 or 5 people and they have the power to fire them from their area. And because I'm sure that the cops could have better training. I've talked to people who know real martial arts like jiu-jitsu, and that apparently would be the best one because there's a lot of on the ground, there's a lot of submission holds and things like that. I think when you find out that the cops tend to train less than a weekend a year on some of these things, they should be doing that on a daily basis. It looked like Chauvin knew exactly what the hell he was doing, but he had been on the force for 19 years. And the fact that he knew what he was doing just makes it that much more icky.
Do you think the nationwide protests are the solution to this?
No, a protest isn't a solution. Protests are basically, I am angry about this subject and this subject needs to be looked at. You're seeing a lot of people and a lot of places that are defunding the police. I'm not really for that. For the simple reason is that I think the cops need to be retrained, and if you defund the police, how are we going to pay for that training? Just saying. I am for, and ever since the Ferguson riots, the cops definitely need to be demilitarized. They don't need to be walking around with MRAPs and tanks and bayonets. They gave them bayonets. It's a very famous when Rand Paul was like, you issued peace officers or police officers bayonets, which is a giant knife that you put on the end of a gun. Why? Why is that a thing? I know why, because those companies that made those things, now they have to make another one that they can send to Iraq, because Iraq or Afghanistan or the Middle East or wherever the hell we are. So now I got this one, and you can't really sell it to anybody, but if I donate it to the police department, I'll get a tax rebate. So that's the reason that all this is happening. Have you ever heard of an officer saying, oh my God, I think I could have saved some lives today if I only had a bayonet? Yeah, you don't ever hear anybody saying that. Okay, there's been some new information that's come to light over the McCloskeys. So let's just do a quick recap of anything that we didn't do the first stuff we recorded for this. So the June 28th protesters broke down a gate in a private community. The McCloskeys came out feeling threatened by a mob on their own property, decided to show off 2 firearms and point them at the protesters. And there was really, and as we stated before, the protesters were looking to go to the mayor's house, and you couldn't get to the mayor's house without, I think, going through other people's like backyards in order to get to the mayor's house from where they were. They were on different cul-de-sacs. Then on June 10th, on July 10th, a warrant was executed. A search warrant was executed on McCloskey's home to obtain the firearms. Apparently they had already given, which I think is smart, they'd already given their firearms to a lawyer, and the city received them from McCloskey's lawyers, who at the time was a guy named Watkins. Guy named Watkins. Yeah, they're lawyers. Do we really care that much? But you know what I mean. So he turned them over to authorities a day after, which makes sense. Nothing, doesn't seem like anything hickey there. But here's where things get a little into the weeds here. Apparently the gun was assembled incorrectly on purpose. What do I mean by incorrectly on purpose? Well, they were taking this gun in as a prop or a piece of evidence for a case that they were involved in, and in order to get it into the building and into the courtroom, it had to be disabled. So that's pretty easy to prove. There's going to be court records from the time that they brought that thing in there. So if they're lying, it's going to be easily found out just like that. So when you look at Miss Crazy Eyes there with McCloskey just going, I hope I did her justice. But with her eyes like burning out of her head, pointing the freaking gun, because all she had was a freaking paperweight, and she knew that. I saw another claim where there wasn't even any ammo in the house. Now, okay, so it happened on the 28th, July 10th, the search warrant is executed. So yeah, there's like 12, 13 days in there. I don't know calendars that are in there. So there was some time, and you could say that, hey, maybe they did that, but the police decided to put the gun back together, Heather, to make sure that it fired. Okay, some people accuse us of witness tampering. I don't think so, unless, because here's the thing. If the pin and the spring were moved, then put back in opposite the way they're supposed to go in, and it stayed like that for maybe months. That I don't know when this case was that the McCloskeys used this as a prop. Dust would find its way in there and naturally just land on the parts, even inside the guns that are there. So you can say that the city who examined the guns, put it back together, if they didn't take photos of the said wrong pieces put together, they basically kind of destroyed evidence, i.e. the dust on the parts. Because if they were in the right way, or if they switched them around and it was in the right way when she was standing doing her best Dirty Harry impression there, and yeah, it wasn't the greatest Dirty Harry impression, but hey, we work with what we got now. So I think that's a point to it. So that's kind of hinky. Now there is like a back and forth that doesn't matter that the gun was used, because I mean on the July 20th, charges were filed and that accused Patricia McCloskey of a lawful use of a weapon by exhibiting it threateningly. I would go batshit crazily threateningly, knowing that it's not a whole lot of a threat if it's true. So there's that. This is a Class E felony in the state of Missouri. In response, their attorney, Joel Schwartz, is planning to defend them using the state's protections of stand your ground, castle doctrine, and open carry. Unless we have precedents of cases of people citing castle doctrine as a threat, as justification for using a gun in a threatening manner, then yeah, I think the castle doctrine has worked. Open carry is supposed to be, you're not supposed to be carrying it in your hand unless there was a threat. We'll put a pin on the whole threat part. We'll get back to it. And they also want to use stand your ground. Again, I think all of these codes are against their the unlawful use of a firearm. So I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but that is how they're putting it. So there, I mean, it sees well, so was the gun completely inoperable? Looks like it was. The state says it was. Did they destroy evidence that the McCloskeys could have proved that it had been like that prior to the 28th of June, i.e. dust on the parts, because those oil just attracts dust and it holds onto it and doesn't go away. But now, did the McCloskey's attorneys think about that? Did the police, the Justice Department who had the gun, did they know that? Because I would probably say that if I took a gun apart to examine it, and good for who's ever there realizing that, this is flipped. Because if I took, it looks like a Walter PPK. If I have a similar gun, I would have no idea off the top of my head. But then again, I really haven't. I've only done cursory cleaning. I really haven't taken it apart yet. But I'm sure my gun, which is not a Walter PPK, will have different things going on inside the gun that she had, which I don't know if was a Walter. So that being said, there's a circuit district attorney who's really, pushing a full court press on this. The governor has come out and said that he supports the McCloskeys. I believe Bill Barr has spoken out in support of the McCloskeys, and Donald Trump, which at this point can go either for you or against you. It's a complete toss-up these days. All right. And it has they have my support that they didn't do anything wrong. Thank God nobody was hurt. Thank God the protest was somewhat peaceful. I mean, there was a whole gate thing, but I saw people walking in the gate on a video where the door wasn't damaged. So I would also like to find out when the gate was actually damaged, because when I talked before, didn't have that. I didn't have that information. So they could have done that on their way out. So I'm sure all that will come out in court documents. But those are my questions. To sum up, I support the McCloskeys. This was giant up. She was on the phone calling 911, according to a thing I read here, and saying it ended like, "Oh no," or "I got to get a gun." Boom. And she hung up. Should have stayed on the line. But I don't know, again, how I would react with a couple hundred people, basically. And it was a couple hundred people going, so it was an angry mob. And never, ever, ever underestimate the abject, defunct stupidity of large crowds. I'll only point to the stands at a Packer home game. That being said, so to where was I? Because I was somewhere, but then I went there and then I came back. And here we go again to sum up. And I really mean it this time. I support the McCloskeys on the surface. Unless other evidence comes to light, they should not be charged whatsoever. You have a right to protect your home. You have a right to protect your property, even when it's a fake gun. And they're lucky that they didn't actually have to use them. Now, granted, is the Militant Moderate a pro-gun podcast? Well, we're not going to be pro-gun. We're not going to be talking about Second Amendment issues the whole time. But, we could say that we're pretty pro-gun right here. And yes, that is a die-cast image likeness of the lovely Miss Rue McClanahan in the character of Blanche Dubois on the loved series Golden Girls. Now, this has been the Militant Mod. This has been, yeah, leave that in. Fuck it. We're going to have half of this is going to be a gag reel. So, this has been the Militant Moderate Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Michael Bolin, accompanied by the lovely Adrian. because I can't pronounce his name to save my life. Sorry, can't do it. Sorry. You know I've tried. You know I've tried. Right. And that being said, please click like and subscribe and click that little notification bell so you get a little in your email saying that, hey, we put something else out. Please comment down below. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm right. Tell me you like this orange thing that I wear on my head. Tell me you hate it. So, yeah, it's an open discussion. It's an open discussion. Did they have a right to defend themselves under those circumstances? Was the protest on that street, was it peaceful? There's got to be other videos out there that you're either going to help their claim. Maybe it won't. Maybe it will. Either way, put it down and below. And that being said, in the Tao of Dalton, the character expertly played by Patrick Swayze in the 80s classic Roadhouse, be nice. I've been your host. Thank you for your time.